or someone you love or know have PCSR? Well, first of all, I'm going to explain a little bit more about what that is and how it pertains to why you still don't feel well after COVID, because maybe that's how you landed here. But look, I have to tell you a little story. This is actually came out of a little discovery with me training, actually multiple trainings with my doctors that I coach. And we discovered that there was some things in common, some symptoms in common, some conditions in common. I think more importantly, the solution. Look, it's new science. That's kind of the exciting thing about what's going on, why it's occurring. But here's the best part. The solution is something I've been teaching for 20 years. I'm going to say this. This training goes far beyond COVID into something that has changed a lot of lives around the globe. And all of that information comes out of actually my own story, which you'll also get to hear a little bit about. Stay tuned with me all the way to the end, because I want you to take a quiz, because I want to make sure that we can help you, number one, but also a test that will be able to show something that we know is a causative factor for this condition. And I think more importantly, for why so many people have hormone problems, why they don't feel well, energy, brain fog. Okay, I'm tipping my hand, but let's just jump in, because I got a lot to cover in a little bit of time. All right, so here it is. I said I would cover it, but what is PCSR? Well, there you have it, post-COVID stress response. Now, that doesn't mean anything to you yet, but it will. Okay, there's something called the cellular danger response. And what that means is your body, your cells, the intelligence in your body is trying to save your life. So it could be a good thing, but it also could be a bad thing if it stays around too long. And again, I'm going to explain more of that. Okay, what does it do to you? Well, it causes an energy crash. Well, that's one of the symptoms. If you're here, you probably responded to that, right? My energy, it still hasn't come back after COVID. Probably wasn't great even before COVID. But brain fog due to a drop in what your cells make for energy, ATP. Okay, this also drives inflammation throughout your body. That's why you're going to see this condition is related. And if you looked at long haulers, that's another word for people not feeling well after COVID. Well, long haulers, one of the absolute classic symptoms is energy, brain fog, but it's also being linked to a lot of other conditions and symptoms. So hang in there. But your cells blunt hormone receptors, especially thyroid. You're going to realize that that is one of the conditions that we know that people are not feeling well after COVID. Thyroid is connected. You'll see why. But I would even say hormone resistance, hormone problems in particular. Cells send out a signal, and again, I'm going to explain this, DAMPs and PAMPs to drive inflammatory response, literally against the virus, but the reaction ends up causing your own immune system to attack itself, and we call that autoimmune. The bottom line is it leaves you not feeling well, not yourself, knowing something is just not right. And by the way, that's, again, probably how you ended up here. Okay, so who's this for? I mean, who's the training for? Who did I design this training for? Obviously, people that want their life back, right? I would start there. But someone who got COVID and their life hasn't been the same since. Someone who has low energy, brain fog. I add one more here, anxiety. Before and maybe even gotten worse after COVID. And when I said before, meaning that you'll notice that some of you would be like, yeah, I had some of this stuff before COVID, but it's definitely worse now. Someone who still doesn't feel well despite, and I'll let you fill in the gap, I eat a perfect diet. I do this. I've taken thyroid medication. I take supplements. I do more than most people. I exercise. You still don't feel well? Hang in there, because this is something I've been teaching for 20 years, an answer to that very problem right there, and it's a cellular issue. Let's say, who am I? I said I would tell a little bit more about you, because some of you may know me from my teachings, my videos. I have a pretty big online following. I've been teaching doctors around the world and the public for almost 20 years now. When I even say that, I go, really? Well, put it this way. Everything I teach today did come out of my own story. I consulted with more than 15,000 people in getting their lives back, so that should give you some confidence. I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. Actively traveling the country, speaking to thousands, one of my favorite things to do. I'm a teacher at heart, and absolutely what God has called me to. Most successful virtual online coaching program, which I love and adore because that brings answers to the globe. Okay, PCSR. Now look, I don't want to bog you down into the science, into the biology. I promise you I will not bore you, but I do need you to understand a little bit about what's going on. So hang with me just in the beginning. All right, look, I said that this PCSR is linked to the cellular danger response. So this is an evolutionary conserved metabolic response that protects the cell and us, the host, from harm, meaning this is trying to save our life. It is triggered by encounters with chemicals, physical or biological threats that exceed our cellular capacity for homeostasis. You don't have to know any of that except this, that you get encountered with a stress. And in this case, the virus that we're talking about, COVID, could be the stress that sent you over the edge. And now your body, trying to save its life, goes into a response. And that response is why you don't feel well. Here's the point. Look at this drawing, right? That little thing there at the very top, and I'll circle this. This is your mitochondria. Every cell has thousands of these. This is where you make energy. Okay, you remember that back in your biology, at least you remember that, the powerhouse of the cell, right? So if you look down here, when it's working well, it's making energy. That's the powerhouse right here. But what we didn't learn in school is that there's another function of the mitochondria. And that function is its cellular surveillance. If you're in trouble, its job is to slow down energy production. That's why we lose energy when we have the flu. Its job is, and you learned this already, to send out signals to the body that, hey, we've got a problem, get the immune system active. And again, when that's short term, you're out of the flu, all is well, works well. But if it happens chronically and you're in that state and you're not coming out, now you're in battleship mode. And that is not a good mode because now you're not making energy and your body's attacking itself. Look at all of these conditions that are now being linked to this CDR, cellular danger reaction. You can just go through them yourself, but of course autism, which I'll show you in a moment how this is surging, ADHD, bipolar. I mean, just go through the gluten intolerances. It's not, the problem is not just gluten. There's something else going on, irritable bowel, autoimmune, we just talked about that, chronic fatigue, diabetes, all these different hormone conditions, autoimmune conditions. So what you see here is CDR progresses. The body starts this, what the cell does is one of the signaling molecules is ATP. That's the energy. So what happens is it starts sending the energy out of the cell, and that's why your energy is, you're not feeling like you have energy. It's using it as a signaling molecule to basically activate the body in this response. So how's it working out? It's not. So what's the true cause then? If people were doing all these different diets, we're getting fatter as a nation. We're getting far more unhealthy. I proved that to you. There's got to be something else. Well, most experts, if they look past, you're just unlucky and it's your genetics, they'll say this. It's the chemicals that we're being exposed to, and only 5% are tested or tested for toxicity, and they're not being tested for the relationship to hormones, most of them. Our buckets are overflowing, our genes are getting triggered, and this is what I mean by that. So I love to talk about this as a bucket, meaning that if we think about it this way, imagine all of us have a bucket, and I'll call it the stress bucket. Some of us genetically have bigger ones, some of us unfortunately. And from the time we are born, before we were born, in our mom's belly, in utero, that bucket starts filling. And as it fills, we're gaining more and more dysfunction at the cellular level. But once it overflows, look here, we start getting joint and muscle pain, temperature dysregulation, depression, mood changes, trouble sleeping, hormone dysregulation, headaches, fatigue, brain fog, everything we're talking about here, dizziness, weight loss resistance, digestive problems. And by the way, you're not going to fix a digestive problems or a bad gut just by taking probiotics or bacteria. Not so simple. We have to get to this cause. As this stress bucket fills, we start losing our life slowly. So the answer lies in emptying the bucket. Now, that's a different task than you would think, because most people think of detox or emptying the bucket of toxins as doing some type of sauna, foot bath, colon cleanse, and you could fill in the gaps there. I made the comment that these chemicals start in utero, and I don't want to make a comment like that without proving it to you. But and this is significant, because what people think when they get sick is, oh, it was this incident. It was when I got COVID. Well, not so simple. We know now that the people who end up in long haulers more sick, and this goes even beyond COVID, it starts earlier than that. And I would argue right here. So this is the Environmental Working Group study, found that an average of 232 chemicals in cord blood. Okay, so that means that before the baby even gets out of the womb, we're finding these chemicals in the cord. These are chemicals from a wide array of household products, but I'm going to be a little more specific than that, because it goes even beyond that. And I'm going to show you a few types of toxins that are very disruptive, and I believe the causative problem here. So these specific toxins, and not just the household toxins that are still devastating, are affecting 4 generations 2 ways. From mom to baby in utero, transferred 4 generations. So stop right there, meaning that if mom has a high lead level, then what happens is in utero, mom loses bone where a lot of the lead is stored. It's very normal to lose bone during pregnancy. And what happens, it goes in utero to the baby. Baby starts off life with a high lead level, may in fact impact the gut, the immune system, and you might even have a colic baby, whatever, however you want to define it, or even the brain function. The point is that happens for 4 generations. If grandma had lead, mom has lead, baby has lead. Now, it also affects epigenetically, meaning that the genes, literally, the toxin can turn on a gene in 4 generations. There was a Duke University study that took 2 identical groups of mice, identical twins, same DNA in both groups, put them in the same environments, fed them the same, everything the same. They exposed one to one of these specific toxins. And this gene, called the agouti gene, got turned on. It affected their thyroid. Their hair became dry, brittle, and actually turned yellow in this case, but they became obese. And the other group, they didn't give the toxin. Here was the disturbing part. That gene was turned on for 4 generations, meaning that the babies were born eating a perfect diet. And just same as the control group of mice. Same environment, and yet when they became little teenage mice, they became obese, despite what they ate. Sound familiar? But that's 4 generations. Physical inheritance of the toxins, and what we call epigenetics, meaning you get a gene that's triggered. The good news is that in that study, they actually turned the gene off. We're going to talk more about that. But okay, so unfortunately, most of us listening to this, grew up in the lead generation, and again, it affected us 4 different ways. This is the proof here in my own life. That's actually my wife's test. And if you take this lead level over, and by the way, when we did this test, they called 5 normal. Now it's under 2. So she's not only off the chart, she's way over here. Okay, so to prove to you though, this was my son's test. And by the way, all of my biological children ended up with my wife's lead level. This one we named the Banshee because he was born with cradle cap, which is a high yeast level, and also just screamed a lot for no reason. My other son had severe digestive issues despite us feeding him perfectly, nursing, and we couldn't resolve them. And when my wife ended up seeing her test with high lead, then I was like, oh, it probably went to my kids. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. So the point is all the efforts to fix the kids wasn't going to happen until we actually got to the lead. And I want you to hear that. But I want you to hear this too. My wife, guess where she got her lead? You can answer the question if you've been listening. She got her lead from her mother, who actually ended up with breast cancer, and it was an estrogen dominant type of cancer, and she did standard treatments, only to end up, and she was considered a success. Okay, so success from the treatments, from the breast cancer. But I said, Joyce, if you don't get to the cause of what drove the hormone problem, you're going to end up there again. 10 years later, she ended up with uterine cancer. 2 years later, unfortunately, she passed. My wife was heading in the exact same direction. We did a hormone test on her, a 24-hour urine hormone, which shows toxic estrogen metabolites, one of which is linked to breast cancer and other types of hormone cancers. And my wife had extremely high levels of that in something depleted that gets rid of toxic estrogen metabolites, and called methyl groups, methylation. But we were trying to improve her methylation, and we couldn't until we got to the source, the lead. So I hope you hear that, because even in my own story, that's how I got my life back. I didn't get it back by just taking supplements, even though I'm a proponent of certain supplements. But I got my life back. My wife got her life back. My kids got their life back by getting to the cause. And I think my frustration today, and I teach doctors, as you know, all around the world, but my frustration today is the fact that even in alternative, or what we call functional medicine, we have people giving a lot of expensive tests. We have people doing a lot of supplementation, a lot of genetic testing, gut testing, and yet very little of actually removing cause. We would have never, and there's a picture of actually our family, none of us would have got our life back if we didn't get to the cause. Now, this, I told you about their lead. This is my oldest biological son. This is Isaac. You saw his lead levels. This is my youngest son, Simon. And these two, the boy and this girl, they're twins that we adopted at age 7. There's a whole huge story there. But Dylan was on the autism spectrum, and he kept going downhill with vaccinations. That's another story. Now, if you met Dylan today, a lot of the stuff that you're going to learn actually got his life back, as well as my own. And I'll tell a little bit more about my own story. But I became very sick in 1999, which, by the way, everything I teach now to doctors that you're going to learn came out of that own battle. So it wasn't my years of schooling, believe me. It was what I learned to get my own life back. And I always say, if Dylan was my only patient ever, it was worth me getting sick. But I've impacted a lot of people just because I got sick. Olivia ended up as a teenager getting fibromyalgia, fatigue, and all kinds of different bizarre symptoms. So as a family, and you've heard a little bit about my wife's story, and only a portion of it, there's a far greater hormone story with her. But from pain to purpose, and I would add one more word to this, to promise. Because when I was sick, obviously my wife in her own state of pain, I'm sure a very difficult night with me, because the spouse suffers very differently, I would argue, than the person who gets sick. And she was in prayer, crying out to God for answers and probably healing for me. But God spoke to her heart that not only would I get well, but I would take a message to the world. And sure enough, by the way, when she would tell me that, I absolutely did not want to hear it. I didn't not want to hear that, because my comment to her was, I can't even get myself well, and you're telling me I have to save someone else or impact somebody else's life. Didn't want to hear it. But the truth be told was, she was right. Wives, they're always right. Or husbands, they seem to always just know, don't they? But no, she was right. Everything I learned and God showed me, here I am. So our story is from pain to purpose, really to promise, because God fulfilled that promise that he gave my wife. I wish he'd have told me that, right? But, I talked about the lead generation, but the mercury generation obviously it impacted me. This is how I got sick. If you look at the sources, dental amalgams, those are the silver fillings here, right up here in this picture. They contain 50% mercury, and they leach that mercury for the life of the filling. I also had contact lenses, which had mercury in the saline solution. And of course, I mentioned a lot of the vaccines, which have ethyl mercury. But you can see that here are the sources, and this one's not even on there. But it was outlawed in the early 90s. They took it out. But if you wore contacts 70s, 80s, and early 90s, you had mercury going right into your brain. But this was my culprit, as well as this source. but I ended up with brain mercury that bioaccumulated here in my brain. And by the way, when I was sick, I knew that my adrenals weren't right. My thyroid wasn't right. My hair was thinning. I would see my hair in the drain. Of course, my energy, I had none. But I also had bizarre anxiety and panic attacks that would happen, especially at night when I couldn't sleep because I had severe insomnia. But I would address my adrenals and my thyroid, and some things would get better, but a lot of things would actually get worse. And I knew that the problem was in the center of the brain, the pituitary, which controls your thyroid and adrenals. But if I tried to address that, things would really get bad. So I didn't know it was wrong. And it took me some years to figure it out. And there's a whole story there. But when I did, I realized that's where most of the mercury accumulates. And you can see by the slide that it's brain mercury that's the problem. And that really, it's the problem for so many hormone problems because it's in the control tower. Your thyroid and your adrenals are just taking orders. And when I found the study that that's where most of the mercury accumulates, and other toxins, and neurotoxins, by the way, then I knew no wonder my efforts downstream really weren't working. The DRAS study, this is a study proving my point. The amount of mercury found in embryos was proportional to how many fillings the mom had, literally. So if mom had 10 fillings in the mercury, and these are autopsies, so very accurate, they would find a certain amount of mercury in the brain. Mom had less fillings or no fillings, they would find proportionally that amount of mercury. So we know in utero, just like lead, right? It's starting in utero, and that's where we get our first exposure. Then think about it myself, right? I can't remember when my first silver filling went in. Of course, I didn't have nearly the vaccines kids have today. So that probably wasn't my big source, but the fillings went in. I started wearing contact lenses. I'm sure I had some mercury exposures through a lot of fish because there was a point where I was eating a lot of fish. Bottom line is it accumulated in my brain. And until I got it out of my brain, I didn't get my life back. And you can see the EU has banned the use of dental amalgam fillings for children under the age of 15 or under 15 years of age and pregnant and breastfeeding women. Why? Why? Because they know. And by the way, no safety studies have ever been done to prove safety on these amalgam fillings. And the ADA still insists they're safe, but yet they're working to bring them out, but yet they're afraid of the backlash of lawsuits. I say this, don't insult our intelligence, because it's considered, before that a silver filling goes in your mouth, it's considered hazardous waste. The moment it's in your mouth, it's considered safe. But follow me, the moment it comes out of your mouth and hits that dental tray again, it's handled as hazardous waste again. So what are we saying? It's hazardous waste before it goes in and when it comes out, but when it's in you, it's safe? Now, it's not what the studies show. Obviously, I don't have time to show this video, but if you Google sometime just for fun, smoking tooth video, that's a 25-year-old filling. And the reason that's significant is because one of the stances that the ADA took was that old fillings, all the mercury is off-gassed anyway, don't bother getting them out. That's a 25-year-old filling, and if they just rub it with a pencil eraser, like chewing, you see mercury vapor pour off that filling. And guess where it goes? The center of the brain that controls the hormones. Mercury symptoms, I had them all. Depression, mild fatigue, well, I had extreme fatigue, anxiety, forgetfulness, eyelid, face twitching, come and go. Digestive issues, couldn't fix it just no matter what I did. Constipation, diarrhea, back and forth, bad breath, had it. Body odor, on and off. Dizzy, had it, on and off. Irritability, all the time, most of the time. Sound sensitive, inability to concentrate, brain fog, for sure. My wife would say I had abnormal menses as well. Low body temperature actually was one of the ways that I was working with a very bright endocrinologist trying to balance my thyroid and my adrenals. And he said, Dan, I think you have mercury toxicity. I said, I thought so too. I did a blood test. And he said, wrong test. So that's something you'll learn, the right test. But anyways, you can just kind of go down there and see. But here's something that's making this all worse in all of us. And it is a chemical called glyphosate. It's being sprayed on all of our food. It's in 60% of the rainfall, maybe more in certain areas. This chemical, I know Stephanie Seneff personally. She is the senior scientist at MIT. This was a 2012 study. She was the first to show that this chemical that we're all being exposed to allows the chemicals, the heavy metals, the lead, the mercury that we already have in us to cross the blood-brain barrier into the brain even deeper. And she believes, and others now, this is why we're seeing the explosion of all these conditions. This is why the cellular danger response, this is why you can go down the list of all of those symptoms and conditions that are just expanding like crazy. All right, I mentioned and I promised you that I was going to explain a little bit about this weight loss connection. Specific toxins drive something called cellular inflammation, okay? And you can imagine what specific toxins, because I'm telling you about only some of them. There's others, okay? And I don't have time to get into all of them. But what happens is when the toxins drive inflammation of the cell, it creates a hormone resistance, and it also then creates weight loss resistance, okay? So I'm gonna draw something. I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna bring my mic over. So let's go up here. The camera guy's gonna get my great artwork. I'll bring the mic as close as I can. This is a cell. You have 50 to 70 trillion of these cells in the body, but here's what I want you to see. Every cell has hormone receptors. These receptors are basically what hormones attach to. So in this case, I'm going to use thyroid hormone. I could use insulin, I could use estrogen, I could use testosterone. But these hormones have to attach to the receptor when they get their message in the cell. And I made this point in the very beginning. You feel great. Your mitochondria, where you make energy, works. You make plenty of energy, all is well. Brain's clear, digestion's good, full energy, and you burn fat efficiently, you stay lean, all is well. But what if something is driving inflammation of the cell membrane and blocks that receptor? Well, your blood levels of the hormone, it doesn't matter. It does not matter if that hormone can't get its message in the cell. You don't feel well despite the diet change, despite the supplements, despite taking thyroid hormone or insulin. Have you heard of insulin resistance? That means you have plenty of insulin, but your cell can't hear it, can't hear it. This is actually known as hormone resistance. So the question is what's driving the inflammation? These specific toxins are known to come into and stick to this fatty membrane and drive inflammation. So the point is we have to deal with the cause. Otherwise, we're not going to fix the hormone. Now, let's go back to the cellular danger reaction. Remember, the mitochondria is where we make energy. But what happens when it's stuck in battleship mode and it's trying to save your life and you're stuck there, which many of you are. That's why you don't feel well. It's sending signals to this receptor and saying, blunt, don't hear the hormone. I'm conserving energy. So now you have inflammation, your mitochondria, you're stuck in a CDR, cellular danger response, shutting off the hormones. Who's dealing with the cause? That's what we need to do. So your brain should be saying, wait a minute, I have to get rid of the toxins at the cellular level, and I have to break my mitochondria out of this cellular danger response. Exactly. And the irony of it all is this is what I've been teaching for 20 years. My doctor said, Dr. P, that's sometimes what they call me, is that, look, we know that your 5 R's, and I have something I call my 5 R's of how we improve this cell function again. This seems to be the key here. And when you look at the literature of what we're doing to knock people out of the cellular danger response, this is the key. You regenerate the cell membranes, you restore the cell energy, and you reduce the inflammation, you reestablish methylation. I just went through my 5 R's, but the point is that's exactly what we have to do. But none of it works unless we get rid of the toxins at the cellular level, and we're going to teach you that. Okay, so this is just the beginning of why you still don't feel well, despite, and you name it. And by the way, this is what my passion is, teaching doctors around the world, because this is different. This is what really getting to the cause is. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, all right. I want to just, if you understand this epidemic of obesity and why people can't lose weight, which is really called weight loss resistance, it's not just about calories in versus calories out. And this was, I just took it from a popular men's health magazine because I thought it was stated well. Obesogens, they're chemicals that disrupt the function of the hormone system. That's exactly what I'm telling you. Many researchers believe that it's leading to weight gain and other diseases that are cursing us. I had to take that and use it because I couldn't have said it better myself. And again, I talked about those hormones. Let me tell you about another hormone called leptin. This is the fat storing hormone or the fat burning hormone. So if you let's look at this and follow me. As you would gain fat, that's called adipose tissue. So if you get fatter, this is a normal feedback loop to keep us thin and lean when it's working. So you produce fat cells, and what happens is they actually produce a hormone called leptin that communicates center brain, hypothalamus pituitary, what poisons most of us, where the neurotoxins collect. So what happens is the leptin communicates with that, and it tells you stop eating, so you're not hungry anymore. So that means you don't care to eat more, you don't fail on diets because you're just not hungry. Simple. Oh, and it also tells you to burn fat for energy, so it reduces your fat. It's a nice feedback mechanism, right? It reduces your appetite and it tells you to burn fat. You stay lean your whole life. But what if something is interfering with that? Here's what I just drew on the board. These toxins work their way into the membrane and also that center of your brain right here. See where I'm at? The pituitary hypothalamus. And leptin resistance, that means what I just showed you. The cells in the brain can't hear the hormone anymore. So that means, what does it mean? Trouble losing weight. Your fat loss plateaus. Maybe you lost 10 pounds, but you stop. You start overeating. Stubborn cellulite. Yep, it causes it. Abdominal fat, and you can't control your cravings. You get the point. So toxins and weight loss resistance, according to experts, it is estimated that 1/3 of all this leptin resistance is related to toxicity. I think it's higher than that, to be honest with you. Okay, I drew inflammation. When I drew the cell, inflammation. So when you read about inflammation, right? I mean, most of you now get inflammation is the cause of most diseases today, and that's what this is saying. It's the secret, it's the silent killer, right? But what we're talking about more specifically is cellular inflammation, not the sore shoulder. That is inflammation, but we're talking about cellular inflammation. So when it's chronic rather than transitory, meaning acute is fine, it's good, chronic, bad. Okay, so what happens is it causes all these diseases. Look, heart attacks, cancer, Alzheimer's. I'm pointing to the Time magazine article here. And other diseases, yes, 100%. Inflammation seems to underline not just the senescence, those are cells that live too long, but all chronic illness that often come along. Diabetes, that's arthritis, Alzheimer's, heart attacks, cognitive function, brain fog, decline, premature aging, even cancer. So inflammation, cellular inflammation is the cause. But the problem is in these health science, in the health science and these magazines, they don't ask the real thing. What is the cause of inflammation? They just talk about it. Well, the real cause, the number one cause, are these specific toxins driving the inflammation, driving the hormone resistance, creating the inability to lose weight and the low energy. What is the cause? So we better get to the cause if we're going to have a solution, right? All right, I want you to take 30 seconds, take this quiz. Count how many of these symptoms you have. This is important because it's the first gauge of whether I believe that I can help you or not. Okay, unusual weight gain or loss, cognitive issue, fatigue, sleep deprivation, insomnia, or just any sleep problem at all. Unstable mood and behavior, thinning hair or hair loss, frequent headaches, constipation, inexplainable body aches, skin problems. If you had 6 out of 10, you're toxic. Then put it this way. Yeah, you're a candidate for what I've been teaching for the last 20 years. 6 out of 10. 8 out of 10, you're likely neurotoxic. That's when we know it's in the brain and there's major problems there. You probably have a lot of this, a lot of symptoms and more. 10 out of 10, severely compromised. Okay, so use that as your first gauge. This is another level of testing. And I'm going to show you how you can actually get this test in a minute here. Just hang in there. But the question is you see that. I mean, if I were you, I'd be asking, are my cells inflamed? This is a test that's 50 times more accurate than a blood test. CRP is called C-reactive protein, homocysteine. I love those inflammation markers. but I want to be more specific. Inflamed cells give something off called melanaldehyde. Not that you have to worry about that, but that's specifically what this test actually tests for. This test is, I would say, after looking at your history, would be the second thing that we would need to do. So what's the answer? Look, if you heard me, you have to remove the threat to stop the cellular danger response and drive down the inflammation, right? The only way you're going to get the cell to say it's good is to remove the threat at the cellular level. So if your cell's stuck in this cellular danger response, no way. And let me give you an example of what I just said. We know that traumas like abuse can drive a CDR. It's called PTSD. You've heard of that one, post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Well, you think that someone's going to recover from PTSD if they're still in the war or if they're still in an abusive relationship? They're not. They have to get out of the relationship and then get the cell to realize the threat is gone, right? My 5 R's, the work that I've taught, is the key to getting the cell down-regulated, reducing inflammation, and getting the toxins out. But we have to look to the cause. And you're going to have an opportunity even to meet with one of my experts that I train every week to help identify that, because you want to know, and so do I, if I can help you. I don't want to waste your time or mine. If the problem is at the cellular level, then sure is the answer. And I hope you gathered that. Real detox must be at the cell. Detox is in vogue right now. So many people are doing it. My frustration when I go to a seminar, and I teach at all of the big ones, when I talk to people, oh, I've detoxed, right? What did you do? They did the sauna, they did the colon cleanse, and they have their 21-day cleanse, 10-day cleanse, whatever it is. No, you have to get to the cell to get well. And that's a saying that I've coined over the years. But more specifically, you have to detox the cell. That's the problem. Look, if we don't get this membrane functioning, you can't get the good stuff in. I don't care how many vitamins, minerals, medications, you have to get it in the cell. And the only way we're going to get this membrane not inflamed is if we get to these toxic sources. And that's been the key to my work. It's how I got my life back. This is something that I really developed. If we upregulate the cell and get it to do what it should be doing day in, day out, that's real detox. The cells have to get rid of toxins. And that's what my 5 R's does. You're going to learn more about it. But here's the other problem. They bring the toxins to the liver where they bind to something called bile. So when I started teaching cellular detox early on, we would realize that a lot of people would get symptoms from the detox, and it was because they were bringing the toxins to the liver, and they bind to something called bile, right? You've heard that because it's stored in the gallbladder. The toxins bind to the bile, and then it's dumped here in the gut. Here's the problem. The body knows what it's doing. It's basically designed to reabsorb the bile back to the liver so it doesn't have to recreate it. But what happens? It brings the toxins right with it. It's called retoxification. So one of the things that I've developed, and you may have seen me talk about this, is the gut binder to make sure you don't reabsorb the toxins. It stays in the gut, and we have to upregulate the cell. We have to use different real chelators in and around the cell so you don't auto-intoxicate from there. And then we have to bind them in the gut. It's a process, and it's different for everybody, but it's a process that I've been teaching. All right, I have to say this, and I'm wrapping up here, and I'm going to show you what I want you to do. Look, first of all, 97% of the population, I teach my kids this, so I'm going to teach it to you. They're typically people who, they stay locked in a fear zone. And listen, when I was sick, I was there as well. All we can think about is, what if? I've done this. What if this doesn't work? What if that? And we end up locked in that fear zone. 3%ers are people who have fear, because I think it's normal, especially when you're sick and you don't feel well and you worry about a lot of things. But 3%ers have the fear, but they make a choice and they move through it. I remember the day I made the choice, and it was like this. I'm not going to live my life like this. I'm not. I would rather die. Literally, I said those words to my wife than live the rest of my life like this. And I made a choice that I'm going to do whatever it takes. And I did. I mean, I prayed that God would bring me the answer. And I have to believe this in my heart of hearts. You're here for a reason, because I pray that God brings me the people that he wants me to help and that I can help. And somehow you made it this far. So I have to believe that's the case. All right, if you want my help, I kind of mentioned this meeting with one of my experts, but it's a comprehensive cellular health analysis. It's not just me, but we charge about $279 or $297. That is the value, but I'm not going to charge that today because I want you to do this. Doesn't matter where you live because we do it on Zoom or phone. So I have the largest, most successful virtual coaching program in the world. So don't worry about that. You will meet with one of my experts who I train weekly, and they will assess the cause of the cellular dysfunction in your heart problem. That's the key. You heard me say it, the cause. So cellular inflammation test kit, I mentioned it, right? Okay, that's a $99 value. I'm not going to charge you that either. And that is the test that's 50 times more accurate, just to put it in context. And here's the best part. You can do it in the privacy of your home. We'll actually ship that test to you as a part of this. So you get to meet with my expert. I'm just reviewing. You get the test, and that would be $396. But there's an assessment I want you to take. It's the neurotoxicity assessment. I developed this over the years of coaching doctors. It's very, very specific, and there's a specific score. And again, our goal is to make sure that we can help you. I don't want to waste your time or mine or my expert's time. So that is part of that. So putting it all in context, if you add it all up, you can see it's $495. That's a real number. But today I'm going to do it for $167 to move you forward. I want to change your life, and I want to save your life. I'm going to end with this, though. Rock Kazakamats. It's something that means a lot to me and my family. And I'm going to quickly paraphrase it. Biblically, when someone's about to step in a promise that God has for them, and I said that my wife was given that promise, we end up in a lot of fear. And you're probably there now because a lot of things you did haven't worked. But I can tell you this about the promise. Biblically, God would send someone to speak those words, Rock Kazakamats. Now, the English translation is be strong and courageous. That doesn't do it justice. The Hebrew words are so much more powerful. Paraphrased, God has already gone before you, and he's given you the promise. He's beat back the enemies. Whatever fears you have, he's dealt with it. Meaning, it's not you. If I had, remember my fear was, I can't, and that was my words, I can't even get myself well, right? So if that's your fears or whatever fears you have, the financial fears, what if it doesn't work? I've spent all this money because that was one of my fears too. We remortgaged our home just to pay for things that didn't even work. But all of it was to be here. The point is this: God will deal with it just like he did with me. It's his strength, not yours. Rock Kazakamats. Be a 3%er. Take the step. God will honor it. He's already gone before you. He's dealt with your fears. Take advantage of it. Click the thing, connect with the experts, and go from there. It's your first step. Do it.